activity in place. Welcome to this discussion that we're going to have towards the tail end of Boca de Oro, a virtual festival this year. I have been honored to be a guest curator this year, and it's my honor to invite you to this conversation. So I'd like to invite both Katie and Billy just to share a little bit about your background and what artistic form that you like to create in. And we'll start with you, Katie.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. And hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. I got to facilitate a workshop yesterday, a haiku workshop, which was a lot of fun. So thank you to those that are watching that attended. It was such a pleasure to do that with all of you. I am an educator and a writer. I work mostly with poetry. I am starting to dabble in some flash fiction and some other types of writing as well, but mostly poetry. And I'm actually working on a chapbook right now, a small collection of poems that should be coming out towards the end of March, beginning of April. I'm collaborating with a local printmaker and artist who's printing and binding all of the books by hand. So that project's been a big collaboration and really wonderful. Most recently, I was the artist in residence at the Muckenthaler Cultural Center in Fullerton, California. And so I was honored with that position right before COVID hit. And so it's been a really interesting year of just transitioning from thinking about what that residency might look like under normal circumstances to during this pandemic and going virtually. But I also teach. And so I've got my hands in a lot of different projects, and I'm just excited to have this conversation with Billy and Stephen. So I'll kick it off to you, Billy.
Thanks. My name is Billy Mark, and I am I started off in poetry, and then I transitioned into my children yelling downstairs. Just a second, I'm gonna get a holler.
What a wonderful Zoom moment.
So yeah, I started in poetry, went to school for music composition, and then wound up transitioning into performance art and performance as a way to kind of bring all those things together, and I guess an engaged place and people and collaborations. And I actually lived out in Los Angeles for 13 years and then moved to Detroit, 9 years now. And so, and it's been great to be with Stephen on this project and get to think in Pacific Standard Time. It's been wonderful, everybody talking about 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock here. So yeah, I just look forward to having a conversation with Katie and Stephen and just talking about and getting to know Katie a little bit more about your practice as well.
And for those of you tuning in from other sessions that don't know my creative background, I have been active in Santa Ana, very much with the Art Walk, doing interactive projects with my art community there, and then have done sessions at Boca de Oro in the past. The first year I had a pop-up choir respond to magnetic poetry, and my friends and I, who are composers, would write music in brief little snippets so that people could hear their poetic line come to life with a choir, and then had a session with local authors, and this year got invited by Madeline Spencer to help guest curate, and it's been really inspiring to create a digital space for our community event. And I think I wanted to pick up on just what I can't help but notice, that this year's Boca de Oro is virtual. Last year it was in person, and many of us are coming to this festival now in March, a year after things changed for the globe, actually. But hearing you, Katie, talk about starting a residency, the Muckenthaler is a house. Like it's not just a residency at like a center. It's actually has like this symbolic houseness about it. Mm-hmm. And thinking for just both of you as creatives, what kind of your background heading into last year was with creating space, and then what you did in 2020 to respond to the new challenges that it brought to us as artists.
Billy, do you want to start? Okay.
Go for it.
It's a really great question, and it reminded me of a project that I did with some students. I used to teach over at Concordia University in Irvine, and I worked with international students, and we launched a poetry project called the Global Poetry Project, which was a multilingual project that brought together poems from different cultures and languages as a way to build intercultural understanding and community on campus. So we had something like 22 to 25 different languages represented and cultures. All poems, if possible, were in their native language alongside of the English translation, because I felt like it was important to show both. And that was, I think, going into this residency, when everything shifted, I reflected a lot on that project. And it started in Irvine with my students, and it grew to schools and community centers in Orange County and South LA. And then I also took it with me to Costa Rica. I lived in Costa Rica from 2018 to 2019, and I was able to recreate the project there with a group of students from Central America. And so I was thinking about that project, and I thought, how, could I maybe adapt that and do something like that during the pandemic? But then the Muckenthaler had these art kits that they were putting together for kids and seniors. And so when I was starting, the residency, and I was really just thinking about maybe what kind of writing I really wanted to dig into, what my poetry would look like that year, and maybe something along the lines of the Global Poetry Project. But as soon as the pandemic hit and we all went virtual, luckily I had done some virtual teaching in the past. And so with this inspiration from previous poetry projects around community building, and then these art kits that the Muck were creating and putting together that people could just drive by and pick up, I thought immediately of found poetry and how creating found poetry virtually with virtual poetry workshops. We did all sorts of different workshops, but this particular project, I thought the really intention behind it was to get people together in one space where they could really be present and create something that was already around. So it was kind of an invitation to find the extraordinary in the ordinary, I like to say. And so it was an invitation to find something surprising in a text or a newspaper clipping or whatever it was that had previously been discarded or overlooked. And using those texts, I ended up collecting them from all of the participants and putting them together into an outdoor mural that people could come and see at the Muckenthaler. But I would say that was, once that kind of took shape, everything sort of fell into place. But the transition was really interesting. And I would say that I've definitely pulled on that experience of working with poetry in the past as a way of bringing people together. It's such a beautiful door into someone else's world. And so I would, I'll hand it over to Billy now, but that's sort of where I was coming from when I started the residency and when I put that project together.
Well, I was caught off guard by the pandemic. And a lot of the poetry that I do is with people. A lot of it is created with people. It's improvised in the moment. The space and the place shapes what it is. And so to not be in that, to not be able to do that was an adjustment. And I remember somebody reached out for like an online residency, Sidewalk Festival, which is an incredible festival here in Detroit. They do things outside as well, went online. And I remember at the beginning, there was this sense of like, artists are important right now, right? This kind of sense. And I was just like, really? Like, art's important right now? Like I think that the person who's delivering, food to other people right now is is important right now. And isn't it strange to go back and think back to last March, which feels like a lifetime ago, but the level of um, yeah, fear and anxiety was pretty big. The way that it adjusted for me was being in my apartment. I felt really disconnected from people, and this residency actually pulled stuff out of me. I was like, man, my marriage is rough right now because there's some unresolved things that we haven't talked about. Now we're just cooped up in this space, and we have to figure this stuff out. And so, well, I guess I'll be honest. And so it didn't feel like art was that important, but at least I could be honest, which is maybe part of how art becomes important, right? And then I remember doing a talk for a local school, and I was just like, you guys, it was kind of depressing. I was like, I don't know if art's that important. That's how that's how the conversation started. But it got to some place, right? We found a little bit of its importance. And I think just really wrestling with those questions at the beginning for me, kind of in the solitude of my quarantined life, opened me up to what I feel like is a spiritual geography, other ways in which we are connected to each other, even when we're not in a space. Call it through prayer, through art, through Zoom. I consider them all the same now. But that's what led to me to eventually to a piece that I did where, at the height of our kind of political tensions in October, I got a suit. I got a really nice suit, and I got into a car, and I traveled from Northern California down to Southern California, across the South, New Orleans, and back up to Detroit as safely as possible. And the name of that piece was Ways a Suit Can Move. And it was like a listening tour. It was a way to instead of the ways that we've been connected to each other through social media and through the media in general and through screens, and had become kind of isolated. And I say not necessarily just in our own silos, but in our own funnels, because the algorithms come right back down to our own cores and our own intentions. We're like, oh, we're all in this together. They're like, no, it's just you, bro. That's your funnel. And so to actually step outside, not be connected in the same way through performance as I was before, but to just feel just to feel this country and to be with the country and to listen to this country at a time when we're so incredibly divided in our own funnels was a way to be close to people and to be safe with people, and to feel, for me, to feel like art does matter, darn it, even if it's just listening.
That's a word that keeps coming up as I navigate Boca de Oro Festival. Sessions talk about listening. People talk about noticing. And your question, Billy, is art important? I'll rephrase it: is creativity important? And thinking about something you said, Katie, finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. I think that posture of listening helps us do that. And in Santa Ana, I don't mean to leave anyone out in this. I'm just thinking currently, just like off the top of my head, who might be doing that. And I think of like Macara Center for the Arts, and their partnership with Boca de Oro, putting 64 libraries throughout the community so that people can find this little extraordinary moment of books in their neighborhood, in their ordinary neighborhood. Here's a space. Or someone like Alan Moon, who runs Santa Ana Sites. Like, you might be familiar with a video game center for playing video games, but what happens when you put Brian Eno's music in there and you invite people to experience what for them could be a very ordinary space where they just go to play video games, but then it's like, whoa, I'm hearing this new music from Bang on a Can I haven't heard before. Or Sarah Guerrero with her theater ensemble, Latina Breath of Fire, and moving it maybe from the ordinary even to like the marginalized voices, and find like, where are they extraordinary? I was on a Zoom last week with Mark Bamuthi Joseph, and the conversation was about normalizing Black genius. So taking something that might be ordinary or even marginalized and making it ordinary again, or even extraordinary. I think, Katie, one of your gifts in what you bring, at least to the Zoom table in your residency, was that invitation to listen. I don't know if you do it on all of your Zooms, but the ones that I've attended when you were artist in residence at the MUC, were you had centering. You had us do centering, right?
Yeah, I started all of the workshops with presencing. And I think, as what you were mentioning about space and about listening, you know, part of it is that we're all coming to Zoom, at least from these different funnels, if you will, these different, you know, and we're getting to know our spaces in such different, you know, we can't leave the house, or we're sheltering in place, and we're here, you know, getting to know our significant others, kids, houses, etc., than we even thought that we had known them before. And so when everyone's coming from those different spaces onto Zoom, I feel like it can take a moment to really be present with each other, and to realize, like, this is its own space now, that's separate from all the various different spaces that we're coming from. And now we're creating this new space together, and we're going to be present together in this new space with each other. And so that's why I start all of my workshops, even not even just writing workshops, but I do some human-centered design workshops, all sorts of different workshops, and I always start with a presencing activity to kind of be together in this space and recreate some, you know, new spaces together. So yeah, and that can look different, whether it's focusing on breathing, whether it's listening to something. I think it worked. I think it worked pretty well.
Billy, it sounds like you might have been invited to find the extraordinary in the ordinary of your marriage, even, and what your creativity might have brought to you in that relational space, I guess. When I think about your work, Billy, you have a centered presence, like Katie brings to her Zooms. You like bring that to your poetry. And I thought maybe you could share about your project at the Googleplex that you did last fall.
How long is this again? So the abbreviated story is that I'd kind of gotten the blues from feeling surveilled, and my relationship with my phone and my algorithms had gotten the asymmetries of power had just gotten a little bit too much for me, and I was feeling a little down. And so I went to created a sound map with which is basically, it uses a Google map, and you can place pins on it, and those pins can be audio files that you can use an app and then go listen to in that place or in that space. And so a friend of mine, John Armstrong, who's an incredible composer, created music for 7 places around the Googleplex. And one day I went, flew over there and offered, what was it? Yeah. Oh yeah. Offered my body as a living sacrifice to God at 7 different places around the Googleplex. So, and I didn't know what any of the music was before I went there. And we started, Lisa Beth Anderson, who's this incredible photographer from the Bay Area, was there. She took some shots, and that was, to feel surprised by the music, and to take the whole day to offer my body as a living sacrifice to God was, do you know what it was? It was like, so the city I live in, Detroit, has shaped me so deeply, as LA has. So the context shapes, right? So that's when you're home. But to actually go away from home and to feel out of place but somehow in that process over the course of that day to feel centered in that place through this kind of emptying offering process that connected me to that place, and where towards by the end of the day and having wonderful experiences that I will share probably at some other point in the future, but to feel home. I felt at home. Like, how that's incredible. So yeah, there's ways that even when I'm at home, I can feel away, and I have to find that centering place. And then there's ways that I can be away, even in proximity to um, the Googleplex. No shade, um, but I can also feel at home. So I'll stop repeating that last part because I think that's enough.
I'm picking up on something here, and I want to tie it to this sense of relationship, like a house. For me, I think of a house becomes a home when there's a relationship. And so for me as an artist and as a creative, I'm trying to build up that positive relationship, either to the audience member, the viewer, the person I'm interacting with, or to the work itself. And so I think that both of you, in how you navigate space creatively, do build that relationship. And so I have never met either of you in person, but I have developed a Zoom friendship with both of you through this past year from interactions like this. Or to Katie, like, I feel more connected to the Muckenthaler Cultural Center now because of the workshops that you've done, even though I didn't set foot on their property. So it's interesting to think about that relational connection. And I also want to just to reach out to the people who are watching and viewing this session, thinking about your spaces and where you might find the extraordinary in your ordinary. I think if I could kind of translate our conversation at this point into a gift, that would be like a gift for, like a nugget for you to take and say, how can I do that in my own living room, in my own household, in my own neighborhood? And I also invite you, there is a chat function and a Q&A function that you can use to send questions to us as we head into the second half of our 45-ish minute session. Katie, were you planning on doing poetry workshops like the haiku stuff or the found poetry before you were poet in residence at the Muckenthaler? Was that something that you had on your mind, or were you heading into that residency thing? These are the workshops I want to do, or were workshops not even a part of it? Were you just going to be there writing and working on like a chapbook or something?
I knew that I wanted to do some kind of community building project. I wasn't sure yet what that would look like. And I had an idea that workshops would be involved in that in some capacity, but I did not know that I was going to be doing the haiku workshops or the found poetry project. That really evolved organically once the pandemic hit and we went virtual. I was thinking about haiku and just that's such a rich tradition of being connected to nature and being connected in the present moment. And I thought that's a really great way to gather people around that rich poetry tradition. And you were speaking about both of you, and Billy, thank you, the idea of being home and also the fact that we can be away even when we're home. And I think that the Found Poetry Project for me was an idea to kind of reconnect with a sense of place when the world just felt so chaotic and fragmented, through something tactile. So previously for poetry projects, like whether for the Global Poetry Project, for example, it was language, like this idea of like hearing other language, even if you didn't know what someone was saying, you could still feel the impact of that poem. And I had so many participants say that to me afterwards, like, I don't speak Arabic, but hearing that poem in Arabic was so moving. And so language provided that entryway to home, to like that feeling of something familiar, and then that point of connection, even if you don't speak that language. And I think for this, instead of language, it was I wanted something tactile, because I don't know if either of you experienced this. I almost found at the start of the pandemic, even though I felt disconnected in a physical sense from loved ones because of sheltering in place and everything, and I'd previously been traveling quite a lot, digitally or virtually, I felt almost more, the amount of time I was on Zoom almost made me feel more disconnected in a way at first. So I wanted to try to find a way to navigate that. And that's when I thought of like something tactile and playing with text, and kind of having folks collage their found poems and then send them in and create this mural. But no, those weren't plans that I had previous to going into that residency.
So I'm hearing that you got there through listening. You got there listening to yourself and your own need.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You use the word connected,
Mm.
and there's a friend dancer named Josh Bissett. You talked about the movements being connected, like,
Mm.
if you could do a movement, you're like, nah, that's not very connected, right? But then there's this way in which you do a movement and it just feels connected. And for the first time, I'd always heard that phrase, but then the connection seemed like a connection to something else, right? I
Mm.
don't know how to explain. I'm on thin ice
Mhm.
as far as I'm on my thin clarity ice here. I'll tell you that. Right? But it didn't feel like, yeah, it felt like a connection to something else, which is, I think I may have even started to forget what that feels like after
Mm.
a year, or because it's been so limited. The otherness of my world has become again so limited,
Mm.
that what it means to really connect in, even with my own body, to something else, like, and that's, I will leave that there. But this idea of connecting to nature through haiku,
Mhm.
and connecting to something else, and to other people,
Mhm.
that you can, there is some way that we can relook at Zoom and find those experiences. But yeah, it is, there's something else too. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I do think normally when we're so connected out in the world with others, that can really provide a window into ourselves, right? We understand ourselves better through our relationships with others and through feeling connected with others. And then when those connections kind of had to be put on pause, and we couldn't be in physical proximity to one another, and those, all of that stopped, I think it forced us to listen to ourselves on a whole different level than we had ever been used to listening to ourselves before. And where we might have found connection to ourselves through someone else, we had to relearn like how to find that connection within,
Mm.
in a different way. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like connection is kind of symbiotic, right? And it also is, poetry, I find, does such an incredible job of opening a window into not only someone else's experience, but then also reflecting back something about your own experience for you. And so that's one of the reasons why I've found it so powerful to use in community building, because it's such an amazing way to get people thinking about the experiences of others, the experiences that they've had, maybe shift perspectives and get them thinking about, you know, others or themselves differently. And we did that in Costa Rica by putting all of the poems in the bathrooms. So instead of, we did like a poetry exhibit, but instead of being in the hallways, you know, not everyone stops in a hallway to read a poem, but if it's on the stall door in front of you or above the urinal, like you don't really have a choice. So you have to read the poem and reflect on whatever it offers you. So yeah, it proved to be pretty powerful, but I think that's the power of poetry, right?
Can I say one more thing, Stephen? Just
Go for it. Yeah.
hear it sounds like you're inviting people into the space of poetry, right?
Mhm.
And we're inviting
Beautifully put.
you're inviting people into the space of a Zoom session, and that's, you use the word space, that you can
Mhm.
create a space. And let's put the word space and the concept of space and the concept of place next to each other, because sometimes those
Mhm.
two get interchanged. But you
Mhm.
can be in a lot of different spaces through Zoom, but you're kind of in the same place. And so
Mm.
to actually see what are the connections that we can make through different spaces. Again, I was experiencing spiritual geography, so that's a whole other terrain of ways to connect through those types of spaces. But then also recognizing, okay, no, I've learned a lot of stuff that I can do in my house. I'd like to go out now, but to be in different places as well. Yeah, I just want to put those two side by side.
Space, Zoom, and poetry are three
I
things that
think.
I found to converge for me last year. I'm a composer by training, and I was in the middle of writing what I thought was going to be a piece for solo violin. And when COVID hit, I just felt this big internal call shifting towards poetry. And I think looking back, I realize it's because I'm listening in a different way. I think artists pay attention. I think creatives pay attention in many different ways. And poetry just asked me to pay attention and listen in a different way. And bringing that into the Zoom space, it kind of took it took away the platform. It took away the stage. So instead of reading two people, I'm almost reading in a circle. Um, we'll get Katie back in here. I think her internet dropped out.
Sorry
No
about that.
problem.
I'm really bummed I missed what you were saying.
It was, I was talking about a Zoom space kind of being, for me, when I'm experiencing it, its fullest potential. It's a space where everyone, if their cameras are on, everyone can see each other, everyone can comment, you can rearrange the squares on the page. And unless you're not in speaker mode, there's not an ordained hierarchy. It's like we're all here in this square together. And so what I loved about that with poetry readings for Word Up is it really created conversation where everyone was bringing something to the table. So as I did more of these online virtual poetry readings, and the community was built up through just a few of them, I found that I was programming less poems because the audience conversation around them just became richer and richer as people felt the freedom and the safety in that space to bring their ideas forward. And Katie, you're bringing up this idea that poetry is a great way to build community. And I think it's because language literacy is something easier for us to navigate than like dance literacy or painting literacy or musical literacy. So if we did have spaces that could allow for synchronous in the moment connection with music with a group of musicians, there could be that kind of collaboration. But there is a beauty to how we have an education system that brings us that gift where we can easily engage people in poetry. Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, as a writer, I find obviously, of course, words a much easier entry point into that than some of the visual arts. But I feel that connection more and more through other arts as well. And actually, this collaboration that I have right now with the artist who's creating my chapbook for me, has really opened the door to more, um, interdisciplinary types of projects, and also the found poetry project as well. I had never created a mural before, and so this was the first time that I was able to create a mural, and so that opened another door as well. So I see a lot of crossover now where I didn't necessarily see that previously.
I thought that it doesn't have to connect with that idea of listening or the idea of literacy, but something that I noticed that you both do in your practice to create community is show up. Um, Billy, you had a project where it was very liturgical in how you showed up in the same way in the same space. And I think Katie, for your workshops, they were, I think, always on Friday. And so there was a certain group of people. If I tuned in, I would know, oh, I'm going to see this person, and we can pick up talking about the flowers they noticed growing in their backyard a few months later and say, how are those flowers doing now? Because you wrote a haiku about them. And so having that same time and same place and same pace converging, I think is something that you both offer in how you do creativity and place.
Yeah, I'm learning. I think I came from a more improvisational background, but to show up to the same space place creates like time space. I've gotten into the habit of just squishing words together like the Germans do and being like, there it is, that's what I'm trying to say. But to show up to the same space place creates like a texture, right? It creates a thicker texture of memory that's associated with the relationships to that place and to the people in that place. And I mean, that's what I'm saying right now is probably like what a lot of people understand and why they keep going back to certain things in certain places. But for me, it was like, it's kind of new. It's like, oh, wow, this is a really beautiful thing to keep showing up, and the kind of the ebb and flow of community that can happen, where it's not necessarily just about how many people are there. Like, oh, look, our numbers are going up, whatever those numbers are and whoever we are. So it's good. No, but it can go down and it can go up. And there is a certain type of texture, that thickness of relationship and memory that happens when it comes to keep showing up. So that, again, like I'm saying, I'm being taught by the reward of being in those places.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I've learned a lot over this last year, specifically having to be in the same place. I feel like I have a new relationship to my creativity because of that, and also, and that's been because of consistency, right? I've had to develop a new relationship with consistency as well. I feel like I'm someone who is not always terribly disciplined, but then I think, well, maybe I'm just being too hard on myself. I'm actually very disciplined. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth, right? But I do feel like consistency and having to show up, like you said, Stephen, this pandemic has sort of forced me to do that in the new ways, which I guess has been definitely like one of the silver linings.
As we round out our 45 minutes together, I'm going to invite you both to respond to this idea of listening and seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary, and where you might see that next for yourself. Like what like, oh, I'm hearing this is where I want to do that next. This is the next space that I'm kind of turning towards, or that maybe it's not a new thing you're turning, but like, these are the steps I'm going to keep taking in the same direction. I'll kind of like continue to see that question of you as you think about it. With myself, it's the word walk this year, and it's the word with and walk with and in combination. And what does that mean for my artistic practice? What does that mean for me in community? What does that mean in the work of empathy and creativity. I'm thinking that eventually this year, I'd like to create a labyrinth that people can experience somewhere in some space, outdoor. I think outdoor spaces are great because people can feel more comfortable as we emerge into what's next. And I think part of the reason that I want to do a labyrinth, in addition to it be about walking, is I think that the last year had this, in the midst of everything that was bad, there was an inward turning. There was a turn, like you used the word inward, I think, Katie, and talked about like turning inward in yourself. I think it invited us to do that, like a labyrinth might invite us towards the center. And there came really difficult moments when we were contending with a lot of cultural, social issues as we turned inward to ourselves, to our communities. Hopefully, in that center place, we learned something that we can then come out of the labyrinth, emerge, and offer it back as like this gift, as this like, I grew. I have something generative now after that degenerativeness. So just thinking about that's hopefully my next like creative practice. And maybe Billy, I'll have to map some poetry on it as the people progress.
It's really funny, Stephen, because I have had a not exactly the same, but a similar vision of doing some kind of like installation / poetry project. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet, but I love the use of the word labyrinth. And I feel like what I had envisioned was sort of something along those lines, kind of a choose your own adventure sort of situation where it goes into different space places. But yeah, I think as far as listening goes, I've been wanting to actually dive more into haiku, so I think I might do that. And I think this chapbook that I'm working on is not haiku, so I think that's might be sort of where I'm going next. And yeah, I have a few different, I feel like that this like intergenerational theme keeps coming back to me. I have a grandmother who just turned 98 today, and I feel like there's something that is really present for me this year with kind of generational stories. And so that's something that I've been listening to quite a lot. So something along those lines, perhaps.
Sounds rich. And Billy, as we wrap up, what's resonating with you?
Yes, to intergenerational. A couple of years ago, I gave up vain speculation for Lent, and it was fantastic. I do it all the time. And this time around, instead of giving something up specifically, I said, let me say yes to spirit when spirit comes around. And I think practicing that big yes, that really big yes, is actually a way of letting go of smaller things that I don't even know to let go of, or that I don't even know how to let go of, or even want to let go of. But just being, that's, there's a bunch of projects, there's a bunch of things to do, there's a bunch of places to go. But the time this last year has shown me something of what it means to live when all the gears have grinded down and something else remains. And so I want to say yes to what that thing is that remains.
Well, thank you so much. I wish we could continue the conversation now, but we'll have to save it for another space place for later. And thank you everyone for tuning in for this session with Katie Zahn and Billy Mark and myself. Just to let you know, this session will be available for those who's registered for the Boca de Oro Festival for 30 days. So you can review this or invite someone who you think might be enriched by this conversation to view it as well. And thank you once again. And here's to a future Boca de Oro meeting in person.
Thank you, Stephen. It was so nice to talk with you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, thank you.